Welcome back to the channel. In this video we have the patch notes for Biomutant's first update, and this is patch 1.4, but as it says here, it's the full changelog. The entire patch will roll out on PC first and then consoles as soon as possible due to the submission process and so on. They'll give an update when it's launched on console. So we do have quite a lot of notes to go through. So starting off with PC specific, they fixed the crash of AMD based CPUs with built-in graphics. And then also a crash when device info contains invalid display data on AMD-based CPUs. Then for the tutorial area, in order to improve the pacing of the early parts of the game, they have edited dialogues to be shorter. They've also added more enemies and loot to these areas to better represent the experience later in the game. So they have added more early enemy encounters. They've added missing loot in empty trenches outside Jagni Fortress. They've added item drop chance for Bunker 101 crates. They've updated best before memory to decrease the distance between the no-nos and the Pensai tree, removed some parts of out of date and best before's dialogues to improve pacing, removed multiple dialogue fragments to shorten tutorial area length, removed some parts of Goop and Gizmo's dialogues to improve pacing, removed multiple camera presentations to improve the pacing as well. So this is all basically being done to make the game feel smoother in terms of you not being stuck in the tutorial area for so long. Basically just to make the entire gameplay cycle feel more fluid. And then moving on to the dialogue and the narrator, reduce the amount of gibberish spoken before the narrator starts translating, added dialogue setting toggles for gibberish and narrator, allowing players to select if they want to hear the narrator, the gibberish, or both when talking to NPCs. Fixed narration and gibberish playing silently and producing an awkward pause when each corresponding volume setting is set to 0 instead of skipping the sound entirely. And they removed the text delay animation when either gibberish or narration is disabled. Moving on to the difficulty settings, they've added extreme difficulty, where enemy damage and attack rate is further increased, and they fixed the difficulty settings not being applied for already spawned enemies. With New Game Plus, they've opened up all class perks for New Game Plus games. When starting a New Game Plus, the player will now be able to unlock perks from all classes. In the settings, they've added a motion blur slider to the settings. They fixed so the camera setting auto adjust player also applies for combat. If turned off, the camera will no longer try to frame enemies while in combat. And there's a fix to depth of field toggle not being applied in dialogues. Now this one I really like. Some of them under this category I don't like the idea of, because some of them will actually, well, at least one that I can see will be classed as a nerf, and I don't like the idea of that, especially with people saying that the combat feels bad as it is. They want it to be more powerful, that sort of stuff. But items and loot, they've increased chances that items found have a level requirement closer to the player's actual level when found. Players will still be able to find items with higher level requirements, but player level is now taken into account. They've removed common item loot drops from high level loot crates. They've reduced the amount of healing items that the player will find from crates and defeated enemies. I felt as though the healing items, however, you did find a lot of them, but I feel in some areas, especially now with an extreme difficulty, players will want to get their hands on a lot of healing stuff. So I feel maybe chuck some extra loot items in a crate or something that you're going to find healing items in, instead of just reducing the amount of healing items the players will find. They've increased the base damage from melee bodies, handles and add-ons by approximately 5%. However, they've reduced the base damage from ranged bodies, muzzles and grips by approximately 5%. So in other words, they have increased melee damage and reduced ranged damage. It's not for all aspects of either ranged or melee, but it's the fact that they've reduced the base damage from some of the ranged stuff. And I mean, that has probably come from people saying that the guns feel far too overpowered, but now if the melee weapons don't feel up to scratch, the ranged isn't going to feel as good either. However, moving on, they fixed resistance stats not being applied for crafted gear when adding add-ons, reduced gear add-on resistance and critical chance bonuses, ensured the quest reward diver's helmet will no longer drop as random loot, removed slots from all protective suits. So in terms of sound, they've updated melee sound effects across the board. They've updated mount sound effects volume. The only person I know from all the videos and stuff I've seen that complained about the mount's sound effects was SkillUp. SkillUp said that sometimes the the mount, walking and stuff would sound far too quiet. But I'm really, really hoping that several people, I'm going to say hundreds of people, complained about that. And I'm hoping this change wasn't just purely based on one content creator putting out their opinion. They've added sound effects for Tribe War Trebuchet. They've updated sounds when the player lands inside HQ after being launched from Catapult. Then we have a lot of combat things that have been fixed. And this is by far the biggest category in terms of changes. So, they fixed the issue with abnormally high damage output due to consumable top mod applying meta damage multiple times during equip and unequip. They fixed the ability damage not being able to inflict critical hits, reduced Deadeye Sharpshooter perk damage multiplier from 2 to 1.25 to ensure that it is comparable to other perks. So even a perk has been nerfed. They have disabled end of combat slow motion camera for short combat scenarios. I see that as a positive. A lot of people probably got irritated with the really small combat sections of like 2 to 3 enemies having the slow motion camera at the end of the fights. So I see that as a bonus. Adjusted valid angles for combat targets to reduce camera movement in combat. Disabled camera lookout when striking characters up in the air. Fixed a few cases where airstriking will not complete its last attack. Adjusted speed of some enemy grabs is now a bit easier to dodge them in time. Fixed kick attack from smaller enemies being too difficult to parry. Parry windows now more consistent and enemies can be staggered out of it. All tribe, Sifus and Looping in the final encounter now react stronger to being parried, allowing players to parry and then counter attack. Fixed issues with tracking on Jagni staff attacks. First 3 hits will no longer overshoot targets and dodge attack is more reliable. Fixed sometimes spawning double death particle effects on defeated enemies. Fixed issue with Pichu Nunchuck not stopping its animation. I mean, this game has a lot of weird names and stuff in it. But they fixed larger enemies with melee weapons animating too quickly at slow walking speeds. Adjusted hit reactions for Morks to make melee more viable and satisfying to use. Fixed issue with dodge shooting while reloading, not moving the character correctly. Fixed issue with airstrike sometimes being cancelled. Adjusted the range for melee attacks to improve enemy tracking and reduce misses. Fixed issue where melee gap closer would sometimes overshoot. Fixed backwards attack for crush weapons resulting in a miss most of the time. Adjusted animations for unarmed and glove attacks to be faster. Fixed an issue where the player would sometimes become stuck underneath larger enemies after being knocked to the ground. Added ability to slide underneath legs of titans. Fixed issue where the player would sometimes get stuck inside an enemy after a vault or leg slide move, and also the same thing after an airstrike. Adjusted sound and rumble effect for successful parry to improve feedback. Fixed issue where airstrike would cause enemies to be launched very far. I mean, that don't really come across as an issue, does it? Improved aiming for jumbo puff when throwing rocks. I mean, with the enemies being launched very far, if they're still alive, yeah, that's going to be an issue. But if that airstrike kills them, they're not an issue. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's good just in case they are alive that they fixed that. And then we have quests and achievements. Fixed game progress not being able to reach 100% due to unavailable quest states within a single playthrough. They have fixed Back to the Roots quests sometimes not being completed. Adjusted Tribe War flow to be more robust. Fixed the Old World Gadgets trophy correctly, unlocking after finding Old World Gadgets. And then crash fixes. They fixed the crash for moving objects between areas using telekinesis. And then we have user interface. New weapon Wung Fu is now only unlocked when the player has crafted a new weapon, instead of being unlocked when looting an individual component. They've added the correct fast travel locked message when attempting to fast travel while climbing a ladder or falling. Added mercenary DLC indicator to the main menu. Added dark backdrop to QTE prompts to improve readability on lighter backgrounds. They moved comic book effects to ensure that the counter QTE prompt is visible. They have reversed hypoxia warning percent value to be consistent with other zones. They've added fading to enemy and friendly markers at 30 meters distance to reduce HUD clutter. And then in the world, they have removed several area objectives from Suburbia as they are tied to the Moog quest and could cause confusion. They've replaced a couple of NPC tasks that didn't work as intended. They've added missing no rain volume to the sewer entrance or oil fields to prevent indoor rain effect. Subnautica Station is now fully covered by correct post-process volume. Improved look for indoor puddles. Fixed an issue where the player was able to fall through the world in the Myriad Fortress, also the Ankati Outpost. They've also fixed an issue where big oil planes were possible to walk on. They fixed oil-filled monsters presentation camera being triggered underground. And they fixed area objectives for Gutway 6G counting incorrect amount of superb loot. Then onto the final category, miscellaneous. They have disabled fast travel when jumping from water. They fixed issue where the unspeakable hand Wong Fu could cause NPCs to fall through water surfaces instead of drowning. They fixed an issue with Rocket NPC being stuck in air after explosion, and with that Rocket NPC, explosion particle effects popping when being removed. They adjusted free fall duration needed for mounts to trigger hard landing. They fixed attribute check labels in puzzles incorrectly being displayed as loot chance instead of intellect. They fixed infinite jump while using photo mode. They fixed fireflies not spamming narration when caught. They fixed child memories being auto-completed when opening photo mode. Fixed some doors opening after using photo mode. Fixed smoke from burning villages sometimes being rendered as stripes on AMD GPUs. Adjusted default camera pitch up a bit so it's not positioned directly behind the player. And they fixed resistance being reset after modifying your appearance. So that is a gigantic patch notes list for the very first patch for the game. And so far, what I've heard about it is that it has made the game a lot better, especially for a New Game Plus. I'm just really hoping that when more people get their hands on this update, and especially for console, I'm hoping that it's not busted in any way. Because I feel they've released this gigantic patch very, very quickly, especially for a small team. But what we're going to do is leave the video there. Let me know your thoughts and stuff in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. I hope you guys enjoyed it.